All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It is incredible to be here again. This is HP's second year. My name is Scott Larmore. I am program manager at Hewlett-Packard. And today we're going to be talking about partner relationships, right? And this is a project delivery summit, and we're going to be talking about partner relationships, and you'll see some familiar tools in that area as we go through this, so kind of to set the context a little bit. So, very excited to be here. We have an agenda. Partner relationship framework introduction is what we're going to look at first, and then we're going to go to a partner relationship framework, and then we're going to go ahead and move into a state of California case study presented by the state of California. This is kind of a cooperative effort that we worked on together, and hopefully this case study will also give you something to take away. And then I think where the real action is we're going to have a panel discussion. With state of California panelists with the context of partner relationships. Again, that's me and my face. I've been around a little bit, been with HP about 6 years now. I was in the mobile world for a while. I do have some, I don't want to bore you with my bio, I do dabble in the academic world a little bit. And this is my friend and colleague, Tom Caiati. He's been with HP about 2 years. He has 30 years experience in the IT business, both on the entrepreneurial side and and on Fortune 100 companies. So he's got a wide range of experience, and he's going to bring some of that experience today to help educate the group. And we have a partner a group of panelists here. We have Kurtis Knapp from the California Health and Human Service Agency, and they'll introduce themselves for those we get into the panel discussion. Vicky, Sady from the Department of Healthcare Services, and Jay Song from the California Highway Patrol. And we also have some advisory board members. Christy, can you stand up, please? She's back there in the corner. Most of you know her. Melody Hayes, I don't believe, is here. Jay is on the advisory board, and Mark Brigman is downstairs doing his duty at the HP table, as he should be. So we have a few session goals here, right? We want you to walk away with a conceptual understanding of the defined partner relationship framework. Very important, right? Relationships are very, very important. We need you to understand how to manage these within the framework, using some tools that you may see in project management. A practical understanding of how to apply these to your own state organization. And I think that when we get into the panel discussion, we'll really start to churn that up a little bit. All right, so the partner relationship framework. So there's a purpose, right? Describe a framework that the client and vendor, right? It's a relationship, client and vendor, will follow to manage their respective obligations, right? There's two sides to a relationship. This isn't a married boyfriend, girlfriend, or whatever. And how they will interact. Jointly manage their relationship and make decisions, right? And Tom will get into this a little bit about how decisions are made, how they go up, how things go up, things come down, and how they're documented. And then there's an objective, right? To provide a common, consistent, and effective approach that identifies the necessary information, relationships, and exchanges among stakeholders from the client and the vendor. Again, client and the vendor, a relationship. Okay, so I really like this is not. This is very logical to me. I use this a lot, and Tom and I talked about this quite a bit. So what is the scope? What is the relationship framework? What is it? Right? And these are all in the context, and you're going to see some familiar project management tools, but we're not using them for project management, we're using them for vendor relationships. So that what it is, there's key touch points. There's relationship management. There's forum management, where you have the meeting of the minds, where those decisions are made. There's organization structures. What do those look like? How can they look like in your organization? What can they look like? And then there's decision flows. We talked about information going up and decisions coming down, and we'll get into decisions being documented, right? And a mechanism to do that. And what it's not an ongoing management of business and delivery processes, all right? So, where does vendor relationships start? So we have Vicky in the back who's involved in sales, so she knows where that starts. And, you know, I'm more on the delivery side, as is Tom. But vendor relationship management starts when we start looking at an opportunity from our side on HP. And when you put out an RFP or whatever, it starts there as well, right? So it goes all the way through the process from when we start looking at the opportunity. We develop and propose what we want to do. We close on the deal from HP. We start deliver, and then go into operation mode. Now you see, on our side, project management also starts all the way down because we're using project managers to develop the proposals, put things together, put a plan together to present to the vendor. And then, of course, project management comes in here, and this isn't always a hard line, but it does come in when we start delivery. All right, so the big takeaway here is vendor relationship goes from end all the way to end. All right, some guiding principles. It really provides a foundation for consistent business execution. Okay, separates and allows focus on critical business functions by the right experts. Right, there's things that you do not want me to be involved in. Right. Because I'm not good at them. And then there's things maybe you want me to be involved in. So it separates and allows people to focus on what they're good at, what they can do. And it ensures the most effective way to things to get done, right? Decisions up and down, we talked about it, I'll talk about it more. It's very effective, it's very focused. People know roles and responsibilities. People know where to go. And of course sets the metrics to drive the right behaviors in the organization, right? All right, I love this slide, by the way. The circle of life and the circle of death, and Tom likes to call it the relationship yin-yang. We went around on this. But if you think about any type of relationship, vendor, personal, whatever, if you have a common mutual understanding of what's going on, right? Very positive thing to have. Communication and trust. Trust is the hardest thing to regain, by the way. In any relationship, trust is very fragile. But if you have that communication and trust and you bond together, it really adds value to whatever you're doing in the context of any relationship. And here it's vendor relationships, right? Sharing information. A lot of times people have hoarding behaviors, right? They like to grab onto information and they hoard it rather than sharing it. And that pushes trust right out the window when you do that sometimes, because you need to be able to share share information, clear and open communication with each other in order to meet a mutually agreed objective, right? Your scope of work. And then, create valuable options, right? So there has to be options that you can create, work together to get through things. Now this is the side that's a little dark, right? The circle of death, right? All of a sudden you're confirming suspicions and perceptions. I don't know whether you've ever worked in an environment where you have a group of people where everyone is kind of huddled in a corner suspicious of other people's behavior. It happens in every organization across, but it's not healthy, right? Underinvesting in a relationship. And what do we mean by underinvesting in a relationship? Is quite honestly thinking, all right, we're here to do work. Anybody can come in and do work, but they can't build a relationship for successful work. That's a big difference. Create a low value deal, right? That win-win. We're coming in and doing work, but we're not really adding a lot of value. So what's the point? All right. And of course, here we go again, restricting the information flow. I talked about sharing information. You need to do it. You need to do it often. You need to do it at forums, which we'll talk about here shortly. All right, segmentation model. So you can have if you take a look at the one axis, there's really the strategic importance of these relationships, right? You have it low and you have it high. And then on the other axis, you'll see cost and difficulty of switching partners. So if you have a commodity arrangement where you're just really trying to buy something, purchase something that you need, you can get it anywhere essentially, right? Or you can get it from someone else. You can switch partners, right? That happens for some things. Where HP likes to live, to be honest, is in the strategic supplier alliance, right? We want to be your strategic supplier, and but the cost of getting out of that relationship as a strategic supplier is very high, right? Strategic importance for the state of California or for any other organization, it's very important, but switching a strategic partner costs a lot of money and it's very difficult. The mechanics of that are extremely, extremely stressful. All right, so I just wanted to touch on a couple of those. This is something that's cultural requirements. It's really the underpinnings of the framework, right? You need leadership, you need teamwork, and again, I want to take everybody right back to trust, which I think is the most important thing. You want to have that open dialogue, that communication, and leaders need to teach their people that we need to work together and have that open relationship. We don't want word of mouth, we want to communicate. Often, what I like to do is have joint sessions with the client when we have our teams together. When we have big project management teams, love to do joint sessions and share information. Brings everybody together and it really helps. Win-win, again, this relationship needs to be for the vendor and for the state as well. These things have to work together. People have to get something from it. And of course, this is what I like. We were talking about this the other day. The empty chair, always an empty chair. Get up out of your chair, get things going. We live in a world nowadays where we don't have hierarchical relationships as much as we do as networks. And your success depends on being in a network. So getting up out of your chair, working with other people, not just sending an email across the room, collaboration, and that's kind of what we're talking about here, right, is collaboration. Collaboration, there's a study in MIT that collaboration actually drops off at 50 feet, if you can believe that. Anything beyond 50 feet, collaboration drops off. So getting up out of your chair, being a manager, what they call a T-shaped manager, can manage up, manage across, and that goes down for the individuals. You need to kind of learn that behavior, and you need to instill that behavior in culture. And now we're going to go ahead and take a look at partner relationship framework, and I'm going to hand it off to Tom.
Okay, thanks, Scott. All right, so I'm going to get into the details of our framework. This is actually a framework, Scott gave us an intro. This is actually a framework that HP uses. And of course, in our perspective, we're typically the vendor, right, with clients such as the state of California. So we approach it from that perspective typically, but the framework certainly can be generalized to apply to either party in the relationship, and we're gonna now walk through the details of what that is and how it can be generalized and how it can be used. So what are the components of the actual framework? So it includes a playbook, it includes operating model, includes rule book, policies and procedures, includes roles and responsibilities, and includes organizational breakdown. What is the shape, the look of the organization? What is the interface model? How are touch points defined, described, aligned? How does escalation function in the relationship? How are decisions made? How does the information flow for making decisions? How does responsibility flow in making decisions? We're going to look at project management tools within the model, and again, we're gonna probably say this too many times, but just to reemphasize, Scott showed the is not. While we're going to discuss familiar project management tools and techniques, this isn't about project management for the entire project, right? This is simply applying familiar project management tools and techniques to the relationship model. After we look at the project management tools and techniques, we're going to look at risk actions, issues, and decisions. RAID, DARE, whichever acronym is familiar. Okay, so an operating model. First item. An operating model defines how employees, organization, processes, and technology are configured. Right? It's kind of the who, the what, the how. And this is a generic IT operating model. Now, as you look at it, and we just picked it because it's a model, not because it's a recommended model or the model or even one we necessarily use. In fact, I'm going to point out a couple of things about it. We were looking for artifacts and we found this one. We said, okay, this is pretty good. But interestingly, if I consider an operating model, I'd want it really to span the functions of my organization from my business strategy, whatever that is, whatever horizon that is, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, whatever is meaningful with respect to strategy in my organization, down to really the operational level. As I look at this one, interestingly, it does have strategy in the upper right, but as I look at the other components, it really doesn't take me down to the operational level. So it's I could imagine what this might be applied to. There might be situations where it could be, I don't know, a senior leadership committee, for example, right? But it's got a context. So here's already an example where context becomes important, right? And we're going to see that throughout. And again, I mentioned earlier, our context is relationship management. So we're going to start to frame out what these things can look like with respect to relationship management. Okay, so going further with this, what are the key success factors in an operating model? I probably hit on some of these already. Should be scalable and flexible, right? And it should align with both parties, client and vendor. And it should provide, in the framework, accommodation for governance. And that's a key word. In some regards, this entire framework might be considered a governance model, right? And again, governance is one of those things that, in my mind, is context dependent, right? Governance of what, right? I mean, governance could be a board of directors level. It could be, I don't know, I suppose at a scouting group level, right? I mean, it could be anything. But again, in context, we're talking about mutually governing a relationship, right, between a vendor and a client. The model should have client and vendor-owned components, and we're going to talk about this as we go further. So some of the elements in the operating model that are probably going to be absolutes, things you're going to want to have. Who's the team? What are the positions? What's the playbook? What's the score? What are the rules? Well, those are metaphors, right, in some regards. So the team, obviously, there's an org structure. We talked about that. We introduced that concept already, and we'll go further with that. What are the roles and responsibilities? Again, we'll go further with that. How is interoperation, done? How do we measure it? And again, back to policies and rules, right? So what are the thou shalts? One of the keys is in governance, and especially governance in a relationship management framework, is the management of decision making, right? It's got to be shared, and it's got to have a number of components, right? The spaces, that's the what's and the where's and the how's. Decision makers, who are they? The forums are really more the hows. The style, what is the approach that's mutually agreed on to manage those processes? Authority, responsibility, who gets to make the decision, at what level, why, right? And how the information is going to flow. And we'll go through these things in some more detail. So here's a view of an interaction model. And this is, again, as I mentioned, this is an actual framework that HP implements, in our projects for our clients. It's again, none of this is the way to do it. It's a way we use to do it. And the concepts, of course, can be generalized, right? So in this case, what are we depicting? We're depicting that there are levels of responsibility, right, in the decision making. I introduced that a minute ago. As we move from higher to lower, we see kind of the change in responsibility, obviously, right? Direction and oversight at the top. It becomes more advisement in the middle, and at the bottom, you see more operations and management, right? It's typical, we know that. What about information flow? So escalation moves up, decisions move down, right? And why is this relevant? Again, this in some regards you can look at this, well, okay, yeah, I mean that's might even be simplistic or obvious. But interestingly enough, in our experience, like many familiar project management techniques, not always consistently applied, leveraged, used, whatever word you want to use. So formalizing these kinds of things has a lot of value. And we typically build this kind of model for our relationships and work with our partners to make it work. So the formalization is the key here. The concepts are probably pretty apparent, but the message here is let's formalize it, let's make it visible, let's get consensus on the approach, and we'll fill this out kind of as we go. So roles and responsibilities, why do they matter? Well, roles and responsibilities contain information about each team member's role on the project, the levels of authority, the responsibilities and competencies, and they prescribe how team members will interact. And we'll go through some again more details. So here's again a possibly familiar model expanding on roles and responsibilities. Sometimes you see different abbreviations. I'll go through it. It's sometimes shortened to RACI, R-A-C-I. Sometimes it's RACI, sometimes it's RASCI, as we've used here. Doesn't matter. The idea here is to establish specific areas of responsibility within the relationship, to identify the key roles within the relationship, and then to assign levels of ownership, right? And I'm going to use the word ownership because I don't want to use the words. The words have meaning in the framework. So what do I mean by ownership? Well, there's in this model 5 dimensions. One is responsibility, and that's the person whose name is on the line, get it done. This person will get it done, and it doesn't mean that person will get it done unsupported, but that person is who's going to make it happen and get it delivered. Accountability and authority, that's the person probably who owns the budget, who's going to be asked the tough questions about business challenges if and when they arise, and will share in the success, of course, so hopefully everybody will. Support, as I mentioned, the people who are responsible and accountable don't function unsupported, right? So who's in a key role to provide support? Next one is consult, people who are brought in to offer added value to the process. Inform just means, if I'm in an inform role, it just means I'm going to be kept abreast of what's going on. I'm not going to be involved in decision making. I'm simply being notified. So what are the keys here, right? involving the right participants, determining ownership of activities, promoting teamwork by clarifying roles and responsibilities, improving communication, increasing efficiency, reducing misunderstanding, and improving decision making. So I rattled those off, but those are things that, you know, Scott introduced almost every one of these. I've said them more than once. So just kind of summarizing, you know, we're again, we say, okay, again, I'll say, well, this is something, a familiar tool, right? We should do this. But we don't always do it visibly. We don't always make it front and center. We don't always work these tools actively and in an ongoing way. And so, again, I'll emphasize formalization as one of the keys. So even if we're familiar with these, you know, the part of the value is, you know, making it visible. Visible, active, ongoing, right? Okay, so going further with roles and responsibilities, and again, familiar model, right? We have a verbal description of a role, and typical components of a verbal description are what is the actual name of the role, and what is the, you know, kind of brief description. What are the key responsibilities, and then where are those interactions? And so again, familiar concept, familiar tool. When we're looking at the relationship management, maybe as I showed in the RASCI chart, well, those roles at the top of the RASCI chart are already defined. Maybe the client already has a list of those key roles. I'm going to actually presume they will be already defined and probably documented. The vendor probably has key roles defined and documented. So it would frankly surprise me if they're not available on some level already to begin. But what's the value? Bringing them together in the context of the framework, bringing them together in the context of the RASCI that I showed earlier, right? Bringing them together in the context of the interaction model, right? So this helps clarify, right? We're building on themes here. This helps clarify what each party is contributing to the relationship, and, you know, we get to the hows and the whens and the whys, right? And some of the whats, right? And so these all will build. And over here on the right side of the screen is just simply a graphical representation. You know, who doesn't like a picture, right? And so this begins to outline where this role, what the touch points are for this specific role. And, you know, eventually, you know, when all the roles are defined and all the touch points are defined, right, that supports the RASCI. You know, it should be consistent in supporting to the RASCI. It should be consistent in supporting to the interaction model. And there are a couple other pieces I'll show as well. Again, just a backward reference to the continuum that Scott shared earlier. Just kind of a "you are here" view of this. As Scott pointed out, many of the activities begin very early in the project life cycle, and the project life cycle begins with conception of the project, right? So, you know, probably even before there's a charter, right? Somebody's got the idea, or the business need is identified as a strategic level. So arguably all these things begin that early, as Scott pointed out. What we're really talking about is the framework for the operationalization of the relationship for an active project, right? And so, you know, from a "you are here" perspective, really it's probably being implemented somewhere in here, right? To just kind of put it in perspective. Just kind of to tie some of those concepts together, again, if it's been, in case it's been too verbal, let's get a picture. Everybody likes a picture. So what did we mean by all of those things before? You know, here's a sports metaphor. Here's a soccer field, right? There's you know, the rules are implied, right? We've got some of the rules associated with you know, the definition of the field constructs, right? We talked about, you know, rules and guidelines before. We talked about roles and responsibilities, so we're seeing that here, and of course, it's the same sort of concepts that we're trying to build on for our relationship management framework, or any other team, obviously, right? Familiar concepts. So the next concept here is, next component of our model is the organizational breakdown structure. So what is it? It's a global hierarchy representing levels of responsibility within a project or an enterprise. So global, meaning global with perspective to the project or to the context. Again, always this is contextual. What are the benefits? It documents details, where each person fits from a functional perspective. And when we think of breakdown structures, if we compare this to work breakdown in a project plan, it's not necessarily assigned. It's not necessarily detailed with durations or a timing element or other quantifiable measures. It's typically showing a relationship between the elements, right? And that's the point here as well. And it can be represented graphically in a number of ways. The interaction model I showed earlier is going to come up again, and I'll tie the concept in. So it also helps foster a sense of ownership, right? Everybody knows where they hang their hat, right? Everybody has a place for that. Provides an understanding of resource breakdown. Well, really, what are the support functions and the roles we need, right? Have we identified and named all the chairs, right, that people need to sit in? And that's what the purpose of the organizational breakdown structure. Again, context. What we really want to take this concept for, is for the relationship management framework. And so here we're doing that. So, I will, excuse me, I do want to go back. I've got this banner across here, keep it simple. I didn't make that point. This isn't necessarily a simple diagram, and we chose that deliberately for that purpose. It is important to do the right level of detail, right? We're not advocating overcomplicating it. In fact, simpler is better in my mind, right? Less is often more. And so here, here's back to our interaction model that I introduced earlier. And it actually captures most, if not all, of the elements that I've discussed leading up to this point, right? So as I expand this section over here, I'm starting actually to describe organizational breakdown, at least at the level of detail necessary for managing the relationship, right? It doesn't have to be too complex. It only needs to be as complex as it needs to be. Keep it simple, right? And on this side, this is typical representation of an HP project. It's not a lot of structure. It's just kind of a list of levels, and as I mentioned earlier, and here it is. It's got concepts of responsibility, right? It's got roles. It's got organizational breakdown, as I mentioned a minute ago, on a very simple level, but the level necessary. It's starting to identify more specific responsibilities associated with the levels. When I introduced it earlier, it was generic, right? Information, escalation flows up, decisions flow down. Responsibility is more strategic at the top, more tactical at the bottom, more delivery oriented, and we're depicting that here. And this is, again, a typical model that HP would use. And again, I'll emphasize, while we use it, I'm not suggesting that this is the only way to do it, but the concepts of, again, the roles, responsibilities, breakdown, levels of responsibility, right, and the flow both directions are the keys. However that's depicted and managed. So one other tool that we use is a relationship map, and this could be, whichever way we look at this, it might be the vendors on the left and the client principals on the top. doesn't matter whichever way, I mean, I didn't label it. It kind of doesn't matter, right? But it's one party on the left and one party across the top. The idea here, though, is to start to align where, again, more specifically, where the touch points are. When I showed the role description earlier and we had the graphical representation and the touch points were identified, doesn't tell me anything about, when and how often and, is it a one-to-one relationship, those kinds of things. So this is just another tool to help clarify, the relationship in those touch points, right? And similar comments for the interaction, the previous interaction model, right? Doesn't talk about how often or, what the, what some of the other operational details are. So this is just one tool, again, to help clarify that. And again, these are constructs we use and typically document, and we'll create a, we'll take these artifacts that I'm sharing and we document them in an actual plan for our projects, which we call our governance model. So we're going to transition again. I'm going to hand off to Scott, and he's going to pick up with more project management elements within the framework.
Thanks, Tom. By the way, just a couple things. You notice there's Helen of Troy and Stephanie Agassi in Tom's model there. I thought that was pretty funny. I just noticed that when I was looking at it. As Tom said, we're going to look at project management within the framework. So we're going to look at overall communications management. A high-level organizational structure, what a communication map looks like. Escalation paths, meeting architecture, right? What do meetings look like? Status reporting, and of course, as I talked about earlier, the notice of decision, letting people know what decisions have been made and communicating those out. All right, so project management within the framework. We're going to talk about some forums here. We kind of have an operational level, forums, management level, and we have executive level. But you'll notice that there's information flowing up and down, right? We map the relationship management with the executive steering committee. You can see the service management here over in the service delivery committees. And this is an example, and it's not, it's a part of our model. This can be changed. It can be changed within our group. It can also be changed in yours. And then, of course, the program management meetings, which we're probably, project management meetings that we're all very familiar with, I'm sure. And all of this framework is led by the PMO. And one point I kind of want to make is that Tom was talking about documenting these things, getting the RASCI together. We can document these things to death. I mean, we really can. But it's important that we document and educate people on these things. And in some instances, re-educating people on some of these tools. So, because we have people coming, we have churn, people coming and going, new relationships are being built. Making it almost part of your onboarding process, if you will, someone new comes on board. So I think that's very important. But it's all led by the program PMO. So some forum objectives, right? What's an objective of a forum, right? And assist in achieving agreed upon objectives of the controlling agreement, your scope of work, your contract, which outlines a proposed relationship designed to exist between two or more parties, right? We're talking about a relationship again. And a relationship in business can mean multiple parties, right? Coordinate and communicate among all parties. And again, I think I just spoke to that a little bit. Very important that we educate our people, we broadcast, let them know what is going on. Manage changes, change management, very important, that will occur over the lifetime of the relationship. A relationship that you had a year ago in your personal or professional life is never the same as it is now. It evolves or devolves in some instances, but that has to be managed. And you maximize, obviously, the value to the state of California and the vendor relationship, right? We're all here to add value. Vendors are here to add value to the state of California. So I think that's very important that we understand the concept of value and the importance of the relationship to add value, to bring something to the state of California, or whatever other endeavor that you're working on. All right, so this is really a typical, what's one of these forums look like, right? It has a purpose, and these are familiar tools to you, I'm sure. If not, what's the purpose? What's the purpose of the forum? What are we getting here for? What do we have a meeting of the minds for? Who owns it, right? Who's chairing it, right? PMO, a project manager, who owns it? Frequency, what's the cadence? Are we meeting weekly, monthly, annually? If we're meeting annually, there's a big issue there, but but what's the frequency? Maybe daily, maybe a daily stand-up meeting. And what are the inputs, right? Dashboards, contract deliverables, metrics, what are they? And of course, there's the client participants, and this is just an example, some business area managers, and there's a vendor participants, the PMO leader, program managers, project managers. This is just a sample of what it could look like, and it can change for different projects. It can change for different organizations, but I think it's a good template for you to use and take away. So we talked a little bit about the cadence, right? So it's important to people understand, and again, we talked about documenting things, and we usually document these in a communication plan, is really when are we meeting? We're meeting for program scheduling on Monday, and there's an output of that, right? Schedule reports. We're doing program risk and issue status on Tuesday, and there's an output. Those things need to be communicated. Those things need to be worked. And again, the cadence, weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annually, and that's a stretch for annual. So Tom talked about the RASCI and how it has different kind of configurations and the way you do it. So this is really a RAID, or some people actually turn it around and call it a DARE. Doesn't matter what you call it. Either way, you're looking at your risks, your actions, your issues, and your decisions, and you're not just looking at them, you're working at them. When you have a project going, this isn't a paperwork exercise, this is an activity, right? This is an activity that people need to be able to contribute to. This is an activity that people need to be able to extract something from. This is an activity that people need to understand in order to be successful in the context of a relationship in a new project, right? So there's the risks, the risk types. Is there a threat? Do we have an opportunity to build this relationship, to strengthen it, right? Where are we vulnerable, right? Do we have dependencies on each other in this relationship? So there's a risk, right? Because of Y, what's going to happen? X might happen, right? I was going to use it the other way around. If X happens, Y, right? You probably should put it the other way. So the risk response is party X in the relationship will take action for party Y. Response strategy, you know what? Sometimes we want to accept it. There's nothing we can do about it. We both understand. We want to mitigate it. We want to work together to find a way that we know it's coming, but we want to have a strategy around it, right? Maybe we have to transfer it to the other party, or maybe we just agree to avoid the entire thing altogether, right? So we have a risk. What's the probability of it going to happen? These are familiar tools, right? What's the probability? What's the percentage that this thing's going to happen? Is it 10%? I don't really care about it too much. I'm not worried about it, but I'm worried about the impact too, right? I want to tie those two together, the risk, the probability, and what the impact is. I want to tie them together. I want to understand what the impact is to our relationship. So the value and purpose of the RAID, right? There's transparency and visibility. And I think I've tried to communicate this to everybody across the board, is the most successful relationships, business, any, are transparent, they're visible, people see, people understand, and of course people trust. Escalation of challenges, unsolvable at lower organizational levels. There are some times when you struggle in relationships in the project management area, you're really struggling down below, and you got to bring it up. There's a path to do that. You want to remove the anything from senior leaders. I got an obstacle. I got this roadblock I can't get through. So what we want to do is we want to try to help people down below get through it. Okay. All right. So I talked about communicating decisions that go up and down. Right. Tom and I talked about it. Tom talked about the interaction model, talked about communicating that. A notice of decision is an effective tool to communicate a decision across an organization. Anyone can complete and submit, goes to review, and then you can go ahead and review and approve. If it says yes, you notify everybody, right? There's a decision that's been made at a level, we submitted it, we reviewed it, it went up the chain, everybody's okay, we communicate it. If not, we just log it, and then we receive, and then we go back. So I think it's pretty good. We can notify people or we can't. I think it's a good tool. So here's one. It's got had my name on it at one point. Yeah, it does have my name on it. A certification reimbursement, right? So we're going to go and have a policy that we're going to certify people. We do this at HP for PMP or whatever. So it's been a documented decision that we were going to do something, right? We made a decision. We gave a background. Who is impacted? And here it's project management and Six Sigma is an example. And what level, and what the action is required, and who owns it, and who do you contact. Good tool to use for a notice of decision. Okay. So our operating model. No model is perfect. I think we tried to make that clear that this is a model that we use, and you can use some of these tools, but no model is perfect. We have used models in our engagements, and we've changed them a bit, right? That's how you learn. Something's not working, you make it work for the organization. Which is the second really big point, right? You configure it for your business need. Always work on continuous improvement across your organization. We talked about communicating, we talked about learning. That's what we want to do. And again, I want to underscore this as I close here. It's about execution and trust in relationships. Trust is very fragile and it's very difficult to get back. So that's very important in vendor relationships.